Hello, I'm Dr. Rich Lee, and I'm not a fireman. However, I am the co-founder and medical director of what's known as the South Skyline Emergency Preparedness Organization, or SSEPO.org. South Skyline refers to the, sorry, I have helmet hair now. South Skyline refers to the South Skyline region of the Santa Cruz Mountains, which forms the backbone of the San Francisco Peninsula. We are about 500 miles north of the catastrophic fires that everyone is now hearing about down in Southern California. Well, why am I wearing this? I'm not a firefighter, but I've had to play that role occasionally in my own area, my own neighborhood, and I probably started more fires appropriately than I put out. Why do I have this stuff? Mainly because there are times when I have needed it where I live, and where I've also volunteered for fire safety projects, which includes brush cutting, defensible space, and even prescribed burns. They no longer use the term control burns because there are times when they go out of control. So talking about fire, the catastrophe right now is the complex down in Southern California, Los Angeles. The worst of them being the Palisade Fire, which is currently at least 24,000 acres, tens of thousands of homes destroyed. So far, only 10 lives lost, but that will probably triple or even increase to tenfold as more is discovered from people who just couldn't get out in time. This message is to anyone, urban and rural. So first thing is, if there's a fire, for God's sakes, get out. But even more than that, be prepared for the fact that you could be at risk of one. People on the beach at Malibu thought it would never happen, except the people further north where they did have a fire burned them out. They made no plans to protect any of their belongings or themselves, or in some cases their homes, than they could have or should have. So starting at the basics, just like the best way to survive a gunfight is to not get in one, the best way to survive a fire is to not be in one, which means you need to be cognizant and ready to, quote, bug out earlier rather than when it's too late. The first thing to have for that is what we call a bug out bag. And not giving any credo to the preppers, this is something every house should have, which includes your most important documents, maybe a little SD drives from all your favorite photos, and ideally your documents should be also stored on that. Food and water and medicine and a change of clothing and your appropriate credit cards, cell phone, etc., all in one bag, so you can just grab that and go. That should either be in your house by your door, in the closet by your door, or in your car. Now, look what happened with all the cars in Southern California. Many of them tried to all go once down the same road, and somebody somewhere stopped, parked their car, and it caused basically a cascade of other cars parked and jammed against each other, so no one could get through. And even if they left the keys on the dash, there were still two blocked up, and CAL FIRE's response to that was to get a Cat D8 40-ton bulldozer and just bulldoze them out of the way, whereas Mercedes, Teslas, hopefully didn't burn in the process, and even Bentleys. Think about not only having what you need to get out of the area and get out sooner rather than later, but also think about evacuation routes. Is there just one way to get out? And if in fact it looks like you may have to do that, you might consider even moving your car, parking at some place where it won't be blocked in by all your other neighbors who think at the last moment, but someplace that isn't that far away that you can't get to it. Also, it depends on which way the fire is going, which way you'll have to move. Think about that. In your own neighborhood, what are one or two or three different ways to evacuate that area and get to a safe place that's fire safe or flood safe or riot safe or whatever? But think about that beforehand. Now, when is a fire going to be a threat? Well, the minute you have these Santa Ana winds, and forgive me for the wind noise here, it's now actually blowing from the west, whereas 3 days ago we're far north of LA, but we only had 15-mile-an-hour winds blowing from the northeast. Anytime there's a high wind warning in an area that's dry, consider a fire is going to start. Look, history has shown that again and again. Whether it's LA, where it's the previous Malibu fires, whether it was the horrible Camp Fire that burned through the town of Palisade. And by the way, currently the town of Paradise. Currently, the fires in Southern California are about 35,000 acres. The Camp Fire burned 130,000 acres. All we know are 10 people have perished in the LA fires, 85 people perished in the Camp Fire, and 18,000 homes were destroyed there, and that's in a very small area. And so far, we're probably a whole lot more down in Southern California. Well, how do you know if it's going to be an issue? Obviously, think about paying attention to the weather. Get yourself off the screen, stop scrolling and getting likes on Facebook. Have something on your phone. There are several apps. The first one is simply one called Weather Underground, and that will give you warnings of high wind or blizzards or storms or floods or high tides. It's free and it's very helpful. And also, you can also look at the radar shots of how far things are coming from far away. The next one is one called PulsePoint. PulsePoint is one that shows you in your neighborhood what emergency services have been dispatched. It'll show you the location and what the reason for that is, whether it's medical, fire, police. Usually they don't do police, but ambulance and whatnot. There may be a car crash where the road that you think is going to be free to even get to work can be blocked by that for several hours. That happens frequently up here as all the flatlanders who don't know how to drive their sports cars will come up here, crash them, either get injured or in some cases killed, and the road's blocked, and I have to do a 30-mile detour just to get to work. Something like PulsePoint would be good for that. The other one is an app called Watch Duty. Now that one is specifically about fires. It'll tell you where they are, when they started, what the evacuation orders and routes are. It'll even show you the wind pattern that's blowing that fire to show you, are you in danger of getting swept into that? Those are two that at least you should have on your phone. Of course, a lot of people, after a while, their phone batteries are dead. Do you have some way of charging it? And many people, oh, gee, I don't. This is something bought dirt cheap off the internet. It's a reserve battery, but it also has a solar panel, so it can recharge itself. It also has an LED light source. All in one, it'll charge your phone. The cable I have to it has two different ends on it. One can charge the phone, the other you flip over, and it's a mini USB charger for things that run off of that. Simple things like that to keep you informed so you know when it's time to bug out, and you'll have a plan so when it is time, so you can get out of there. Now, that's just getting out of a fire, avoiding one, knowing when's coming and being prepared for that. But there's more that you can do. The next step up from that is if you want to first is to save your life by evacuating appropriately. Second is maybe save your home. And the way to that is to look up the process of what's called house hardening. And there are YouTube videos on that, because the biggest threat to houses, especially when they're close together, isn't usually the flame front unless you got a real firestorm. And in many cases, that's what did happen in Pacific Palisades. And at that point, there's nothing you can do about it. But in other situations, it's simply the practice of having nothing flammable within 5 feet of your house. And the reason for that is it's embers. If you saw the videos in these high wind firestorms, it looked like a hailstorm of fire moving horizontally through the area. And those embers will move up into the attic vent spaces in most houses, which have not been accurately screened. Most of them have a 1/4-inch screen. You need something that's down to like a window screen, only made of metal. So those embers are less likely to get into the attic and then start the house burning from the inside out. So look up house hardening as a way of protecting your home if there's any chance of doing that. And then beyond that, you have what's called defensible space. You only have so much control of the area around your house. And out here, most houses are on a fair amount of acreage. So every year we weed whack and we cut back brush and we build a defensible space, which doesn't mean eliminating all trees, but it's simply eliminating what are called fire ladders. A flame front that's coming up has to be at least higher than 6 feet to catch the bottom of a tree on fire, preferably higher than that, depending on the tree. You can look that up as well. Look up defensible space. There's a lot of information on the CAL FIRE website. For those who don't live in California, there are probably other community resources or state resources that have the similar information on that. Number one, an evacuation plan. Number two, a bug out bag. Number three, being aware of where the threats are and when they're coming and how quickly you have to move. Again, PulsePoint is one app, Firewatch is another, and there are others, I'm sure, but those are two that we use mostly here. As far as websites go in California, CAL FIRE, or the California Division of Forestry, which is what they used to be called because they did forest management. Now they're spending all their time busting their ass putting out wildfires. Anyway, CAL FIRE has on their website all the fire maps of where the fires are, where the evacuation zones are, whether it's a number one, get out now or be ready to evacuate, and you could look at that. They also now, if you go to the 3D link on there, you can actually see the access point of webcams, and there are thousands of them throughout the state of California. You click on that, it'll show you what the camera is seeing as far as flames or snow or weather. And it's not only entertaining, but it's also very informative. So you have your bug out plan, you have your apps that will tell you when it's time to go, or at least give you some clue to that. You hopefully have taken some time to look up what it takes to, quote, harden the house that you have and do those practices, and then look up the whole process of defensible space. Behind me, you can probably hear someone going with a chainsaw down in our community here, probably clearing a fallen tree more than anything else, or a tree that's about to fall in their road. So actually, the community I live in has been designated as a fire-wise community, meaning that we've looked at all the literature, we've coordinated with our local fire departments, which in this case is CAL FIRE, to make all the structures and roads here as safe as possible for fire or fire evacuation. Because of that, the insurance companies are not canceling our policies. State Farm is probably the last insurance company to do that, but in several zip codes south of here and a couple north, because they have not made those preparations, they've basically been canceling the fire policies for individuals, not whole zip codes, but those in the area that either won't or can't provide enough defensible space or preventive measures. So, defensible space. Now, you don't have control beyond your property, but what kind of irks me is that the Pacific Palisades was a community of very wealthy people, some even billionaires. And they're now up in arms and angry about the governor and the mayor because they didn't do the right fire risk mitigation, I guess cutting brush or trees or whatever, where was the original source of this fire, if it even was a brush fire, which at this point for that one, they believe it was. Well, if they're not going to do it, and frankly, whether it's California or any state in the nation, or many of them, infrastructures aren't what they used to be. So if they're not going to do it, then get together and do it yourself. We have a fire safe council. We're in an area that's 200 square miles with only 2,000 people. Yet we pulled that together from all the people up here who live here because of the beauty, or live here because they can't get along with anyone in proximity. But we banded together to create a fire safe council to mitigate the highest risk areas in terms of defensible space, doing brush cutting, doing tree limbing, preventing fire ladders, clearing roads so that CAL FIRE can get in and people can get out. All that is done through a community effort on property that isn't theirs. In their case, there's no excuse. With all the money they have, they could have said, look, maybe we should see what our risks are and then pay people to do that. What we do is we get grant money, or we pull the money together ourselves, and we actually hire crews from the local prison farm. They're paid less. They work hard. In fact, a lot of prisoners are now your mainline, frontline firefighters. And what's sad is when they come out of prison, in the past, there are restrictions that they couldn't get a job as a firefighter. Anyway, you've hardened your home, and now, again, start thinking about where the risk of fire starting and moving into your community are. Is there anything you can do about that? Obviously, all the neighbors around you, make sure they harden their homes so they don't catch fire and burn your house up, even if you've hardened yours. Talk to your local fire department, your fire chiefs, and ask them, where do they see the biggest threats for your neighborhood or your community burning down? And what would they do or suggest the community do to mitigate or minimize those threats? So this is kind of fun. These little tools here. Obviously, you can hear chainsaws for those who know how to use them. These can be as deadly as any handgun, or maybe deadlier because people don't know how to use them right. They'll lose a limb or a finger or something. Gasoline ones are better for big trees. That may be an issue because the state is going to be banning small gasoline engines. I hope it doesn't apply to the 36-inch chainsaws that CAL FIRE needs to fell trees when they're burning snags. But the electric chainsaws have evolved, and most people can handle them. They're more expensive. They're a little heavier, but they work. You don't have to worry about fuel and chokes and getting to start right or not running right in carburetors. Just make sure the batteries are charged. What you saw me pulling off was an official firefighter's hat. You don't need one of those, but if you're going to be doing anything in your community where you want to be at least able to maybe get back in, a lot of people they're getting themselves, a little helmet and a reflective vest. These are like a couple bucks. That's good anyway, because if you're out of your car and stuck somewhere and it's nighttime and there's fires going and they're looking to help people evacuate if they're injured, you'll be able to be seen better. And yeah, that's reflective tape on the helmet. And this also keeps embers from falling on your head and burning up your nice hairdo. Obviously gloves, and they should be leather. Remember, nylon and synthetics burn. A good set of leather gloves. You may have to pull debris out of the way to get yourself, your or your car down or off the road, or just to get out of your own home. So if your hands are cut or messed up, you're useless. So a set of gloves, good leather ones. I'm wearing a Nomex Wildland Fires outfit. Basically, I bought used off of eBay. I don't have one of the fancy ones that they're giving all the people in the media. I don't have it pinned back so I look thinner. It's something that not everyone needs. In fact, the simpler thing to do is go to a surplus store and get a pair of Nomex flight overalls. Nomex is the material that is generally fireproof and used by most of them. This is a little more heavy duty. The zippers are metal, so they won't melt like a nylon zipper, but if it's that hot, I'm in big trouble anyway. What I pulled off is a surplus military Nomex hood. Again, fireproof material, probably less than $10, handy to have around. And these are cute too. These are flight or pilot's Nomex gloves. They're much more dexterous. They have a leather palm. I wouldn't use this for pulling heavy, sharp objects, but at least protecting your hands. And the back is Nomex, and they're quite supple. They're almost like a fancy evening glove with a very thin leather lining, something to consider. You probably heard the song, "Smoke Gets in Your Eyes." Well, it does. Now, most people don't have a set of goggles, or maybe you've got a set from skiing that's not too dark. In the worst case scenario, not only is it going to get in your eyes, it's going to get in your lungs. The simplest thing, and this is actually not an ideal one, this is an N95 mask. It'll filter out 95% of particulates down to a certain size. The better ones are formed and they actually have a valve, so you breathe out through that, but no, don't breathe in. They're made by 3M. They give you more room around your face. They won't fog up your glasses, and definitely a better way to go. But when things are bad, you have to resort to something like this. This is simply a respirator, probably $20, $30. The filter packets are replaceable, and you get different ones for different degrees of particulates. This will supposedly filter out 100% of particulates, at least from smoke, providing it fits close to your head. That's important because otherwise you're going to be breathing dust in or smoking around the border, but this is better than nothing. And again, if you can't breathe, you can't see, you can't get anywhere. This is something that hopefully I'll never use and you'll never use or need. It's a portable emergency fire shelter. Basically, it's a one-man small pup tent, if you will, that you dig a little trench in the ground, lie down, pull this over you. It's almost like a Mylar sleeping bag. Emergency fire shelter. I bought this used. This is one of the older versions. It isn't as good. We call these shake and bake. And what else you see here, these are what we use, what firefighters use for fighting fire. We also use for clearing brush fairly quickly. This device is a brush hook. Basically, it's a heavy machete that you don't have to get down and cut a brush. You can just swing it around and clear it out of the way very quickly. This is the famous Pulaski fire axe. You can chop a tree if you've got enough time for that, but also dig trenches and at least get something started as far as a fire trench. Oftentimes they use what's called a combi tool. It's flexible. It has a shovel that can also be used as a hoe. It has this little pick end, which probably isn't all that useful for a pick, but what I've been told is it's used for people, especially supervisors, to lean on comfortably. By loosening this, you can get the shovel to work that way. And again, start to dig, scratch a bare area where the fire, at least a low fire, won't go. The better tool for that is called a McLeod fire rake. Again, this is used to pull fallen leaves and what we call duff out of the way very quickly. And then you can dig a more bare area so fire won't pass that, possibly. Lastly, we have what's called the water backpack. It's basically a 5-gallon backpack with a pump that can shoot quite a ways. We're talking up to 30 feet. We lovingly refer to this as a piss pump. Anyway, this is what the people are using in wildland fires now. In urban fires, obviously, they're using hoses mainly, but when a house is already totally involved, it's unlikely that a hose is going to make any difference there. Your best bet is to wet down, if you can, a house that is not burning yet. But again, they've had problems because PG&E cut the power to areas so that power lines wouldn't start fires from brush heating, but some of those power lines also powered pressure pumps and pumps for the fire hydrant systems. That created a little bit of a problem. Out here, you don't usually fight fire with water, you fight fire with fire. And one tool for that, and you'll see it all the time, is what's called a drip torch. You're basically starting a burn in the direction, hopefully, of the fire that's coming towards you. So you've eliminated the fuel in a more controlled fashion than something that's coming and racing towards you. There's probably no time to do that in what was going on in Los Angeles right now. In summary, number one, have a plan to get out. Have several ways of doing that. Number two, find out when you do need to get out or when you can stay. And one way to do that is get the Pulse Point app, get the Firewatch app, look at your local websites. There's one other one. Although it applies to California, it pretty much covers the whole world in slightly lesser detail. It's called CalTopo. And in there, in the legend, click on active fires. If that doesn't inform you, what'll scare the crap out of you is if you click on fire history, and you'll see all the areas that have burned in the past that could burn again. Many of them, if you're in California, are probably not too far from your own home. So fires can happen anywhere. You don't want to have them to happen to you. Have everything you need for a bug out plan. Have an evacuation plan that you can actually use and a procedure for that. Ideally, have a place to go as well, or think of one, and that may change depending where the fires are in terms of where they set up evacuation centers. Have at least what you need so you don't burn while you're getting yourself out of there. Hopefully you've left long before that risk occurs. And again, that goes back to your go bag. Do some hardening of your home. Look up what that means. At basics is move everything you can that's flammable at least 5 feet from your home. Make sure if there's any access to any vents of any kind that you've covered them with very fine mesh screens so embers won't work their way in. Try and encourage your neighbors to do that as well. That's easier said than done. Because again, if those houses are all hardened, they're likely to burn more slowly and less likely to carry a flame front or full crown fire over into your house, which would burn it regardless of how much you've hardened it, unless it's made fully of concrete or you've got a bunker. And then get together with your local fire departments and your community. If you don't have a Firewise Council, first of all, find out if you don't start one, for God's sake. Most people have the time to do that, or they wish they had done that after it's too late. And find out how to minimize and mitigate all the threats to your community so that you won't have the chance of a disaster as bad that hit Pacific Palisades is less likely to destroy your home or your life. Be fire wise, be fire safe, and take care of yourself.